They said the road ended long before you could see it end. That was the first lie. Out here, the desert pretends it's empty, but nothing about it is empty. Heat hangs like a verdict. Wind drags 1,000 years of broken whispers over a crust of salt white earth. And every mile you think you're alone, something is walking just out of sight, keeping pace with your shadow. I arrived in the summer of '74 with a state map that showed Pine Hollow like a smudge under a beige thumbprint. It was the kind of dot you only notice if you're looking for a place to disappear. Survey and soil. The letter had said, stamped with the kind of authority that doesn't have to explain itself. My job used to be simple. Measure what refuses to be measured, put borders around stubborn land, and make that land sit still on paper. But that was before I learned that some places measure you back. At noon, the sky was the color of a knife blade. The road narrowed to one lane and then to a rumor. Mesquite bushes leaned toward the path like eavesdroppers. The air smelled electric, like the seconds before lightning strikes. On the ridge, a vulture carved a black question mark into the sun. My truck stuttered over washboard dust, and when it recovered, the silence did not. It's a strange thing to notice, the absence of insects, the absence of bird calls, the absence of the ordinary. Silence is never just silence. It's a presence that moved in after the others were evicted. There was a sign once. You could tell by the two gray posts rising out of the ground like bone. Whatever the sign said was torn away by weather or hands. I couldn't tell which. I stopped anyway, folded the letter again, and read the address for the 5th time. There was no mile marker to reassure me I existed. There was only distance and a heat haze that disguised itself as a town. I drove forward and the mirage didn't blink. The road lowered itself between two hills, the kind of soft-shouldered rise that deserts use to hide their secrets. And just like that, Pine Hollow revealed itself not with fanfare, not with a sudden flourish, but with a quiet certainty, like a memory you didn't know you still had. A single main street, unambitious and tired. A string of storefronts with painted windows and letters missing from their names. HLL's GOCY. Pine PHA Macy. Diner so blunt it felt like a dare. A sleepy gas station with a crown of rust. A motel, the Silver Comet, with a vacancy sign that flickered even in daylight. Farther down, a church with a white door and no cross, its bell silent, and its bell rope frayed to a soft, exhausted frizz. Beyond the last building, a schoolhouse so square and proper you could have cut your finger on its outline, and a flagpole with a halyard lacing the air. You can tell who you are by the way a town looks at you. Pine Hollow looked at me with nothing. No curiosity, no suspicion, not even the tired acceptance of a place used to travelers. The streets were not empty. Exactly. There were people, but they were arranged like props waiting for a scene to start. A boy straddled a bicycle, 1 foot down, 1 foot up. A woman froze with a sack of flour halfway to her trunk. A man showed his side profile to the window of the barber shop and never moved. Not statues, not mannequins. People who had practiced being still until it became a civility. When I turned off the ignition, the only sound was the engine ticking itself cool and the far-off suture of the wind sewing the horizon back together. I stepped out and the heat slipped under my collar like a hand. 2 doors down from the gas station was a general store that tried hard to be everyone else's memory of a general store. The bell above the door didn't ring when I pushed it. It exhaled. Inside, the light had weight. A radio hissed behind the counter, set between stations as if the right one had been revoked. The air smelled of sugar, rope, soap, mouse, and coin. The man at the counter had a face you could trust once and then never again. He had that carpenter's patience around the eyes and a mouth too tidy to be honest. He didn't greet me until I was close enough to see the pattern of crumbs and tiny black dots, poppy seeds, caught in his mustache. "Don't get many visitors here," he said. "Is that so?" I said, because you should never greet a repeated phrase with surprise. Repetition is a test. Whoever uses it wants to know if you will play along. He nodded, satisfied to have said his line. "You'll be wanting a room," he added, as if the town had voted. "Silver Comet," I said. "Does it have working air?" "Doesn't need to," he said. It gets cool at night. I pretended to consider this lie. I bought 2 bottles of water and a bag of jerky, so dry might have been kindling. I asked for directions to the survey marker mentioned in my letter, a brass disc set in concrete west of town, the official mouth of the land I was supposed to listen to. West, he said, and pointed east. His fingers shook a little, like a compass arguing with itself. Follow the sound, he added as if he had paid for the line with his own blood. What sound? I asked. He blinked, the kind of blink that buys you time when you've told the truth by accident. Wind, he said. Then, after a pause that stretched good manners to the snapping point, we don't get many visitors here. I stepped back onto the street with the distinct feeling of walking out of a set while the director was still talking. Across the way, the diner had 6 stools, 3 tables, and 1 waitress. The waitress was maybe 50, maybe 100. The desert doesn't let you know. She wore a paper hat like a joke she thought might help. When she saw me, she wiped a spotless section of counter with the tender concentration of a violinist tuning an open string. Coffee, she asked. Water, I said. Then coffee. You'll want pie, she said. It wasn't a question. She slid a plate in front of me. A wedge of apple, so neat each slice looked like it had signed a contract. The crust was golden in the way magazine crusts are golden, the kind of golden achieved by photographic retouching and divine favor. Where can I find a county surveyor? I asked. Or the sheriff. We don't get many visitors, I said with her. Right? Her smile was small, but not unkind, like a secret teaching itself manners. She poured coffee. The radio in here was marginally more confident than the one at the general store. Between static, a woman sang 3 words of a hymn, and then not the 4th. The clock on the wall said 2 times at once. The ceiling fan rotated with devotion, but moved no air. There's a marker, I said. A brass plate. I'm supposed to take elevations and samples. I'll need access to the water table, if there's one. Water table, she repeated, tasting the words like a recipe she used to know. She poured another coffee that I hadn't asked for and pushed it to the empty stool beside me, as if for the ghost of a friend who was habitually late. Out past the schoolhouse, she said, not looking up. When you get to the fence, you'll hear it. The wind, I said. The fence, she said. We let that settle. Outside, a car passed. It made a sound that cars don't make anymore, a high whistling through its grill like a kettle about to confess. I ate the pie because it would have been rude not to. It was perfect, which is to say it was absolutely wrong. Good pie is flawed in ways that make it human. This tasted like memory in costume. I paid and left a tip too generous for what I consumed and not nearly enough for what I was asking of them. Back on the street, a dog regarded me with academic interest and then decided my dissertation was not worth reading. The boy on the bicycle blinked for the first time. The woman with the flower placed it in the trunk and closed the lid softly, as if she were tucking a child into a bed made of steel. The Silver Comet had 8 doors and 1 key. The proprietor was not at the desk, but he was not absent either. His jacket hung from a hook. His ledger lay open to a page where the names lined up like teeth in a pleasant, docile smile. I rang the bell, and it made no sound because there was no bell. My finger found only air. So I wrote my name, a version of it, and the time, and the amount of cash I intended to pay, which was symbolic in towns like this. Money is a polite fiction in the desert. What you offer is yourself. The room had a single window and a bed whose springs remembered other bodies. A painting of a comet in thick white strokes hung above the headboard, too recent to be from the motel's heyday, too earnest to be ironic. I set my bag down, removed my instrument case, and took out the transit level I always pretended was the first and only one I ever owned. It had seen other deserts. It had looked at the sun by mistake and forgiven itself. I wiped it down the way you wipe a friend's brow. At 4 in the afternoon, the town sighed and changed posture. The barber turned his chair. The boy pedaled once. A door I hadn't seen opened in a wall I thought was blank. Evening in desert towns is the moment when you learn which of your questions will never be answered. Long shadows made citizens of the unimportant. The schoolhouse bell did not ring, but its rope quivered with the confidence of having something to say. I walked toward the western edge, past the church, past the roofline of the school, to the fence the waitress had mentioned, 8 strands of wire double-twisted and stapled to posts that were too new for the rest of the story. On the other side, the land yawned like a grave, still deciding whose name to accept. That's when I heard it. Not the wind, not electricity, not the rustle of animal or the distant sermon of a thunderhead. A lower sound, almost below sound, a pressure more than a tone. It came in slow, patient pulses, the way a sleeping animal breathes when it knows you are watching. You don't hear a noise like that with your ears. You hear it with your bones. My teeth remembered an old cold. The hair on my arms decided democracy was overrated and stood up at once. The fence hummed at a frequency human argument can't reach. I touched the wire and it wasn't live. No shock, but it was alive. Something traveled along it in both directions at once, like a thought changing its mind about itself. Far out, beyond the first flats and the second, a structure jutted from the earth. Some bureaucrat's idea of temporary architecture, the kind that arrives on a truck and stays until it forgets where it came from. 2 white trailers with windows like withheld opinions. A dish angled toward the sky, as if listening to a conversation between angels who weren't speaking to us. I took out the transit and the notebook. When the eyepiece filled with a clean circle of distance, the dish tightened to a sharp idea. Up close, it was pitted and scabbed, salted by storms. A small sign had fallen off its post and landed face down in the dust. I used my boot to turn it over. There was no name, only a string of numbers stamped in a font that government agencies use when they are congratulating themselves for knowing what they refuse to tell. Behind me, the schoolhouse door opened and closed, a tiny faraway clap of wood on wood. Children's voices rose and then fell, as if the air had made a decision on their behalf. I turned and the playground was there, but it was not playing, for swings moved at exactly the same pace, exactly the same distance, as if an invisible wind had been hired to believe in symmetry. No children. The voices had been a kindness the air performed to remind me what it could take away. The first time you think about leaving is the last time when leaving is still an option. That thought came and went, and like all good warnings, it was polite and too late. I made a note of the dish, the trailers, the fence, the frequency. My handwriting changed shape. The letters leaned toward each other as if gossiping behind my back. I had written my own name across the top of the page out of habit, and as the sky dulled from blade blue to bruised lavender, I looked down and saw the curve of the south beginning to close, the line of the T forgetting to cross itself, my name trying on other versions in a mirror. At 7, the town performed a ritual without saying so. Window by window, light bloomed and then disappeared as if a stage manager were rehearsing cues. The diner's neon sign inhaled a shy pink and held it too long. The radio behind the general store committed to a frequency and then asked forgiveness. The waitress in the hat stood in the doorway of the diner and didn't wave, which was the kindest thing she could have done. The fence hummed at a slightly higher pitch. The pulses arrived closer together, a panting not of exhaustion but of alertness. In the distance, a coyote sang 3 notes and then revised the 4th. My notebook paper went soft under my fingers as if somebody had breathed on the other side of it. "I hear you," I said to the fence, which is a ridiculous thing to say, which is why it felt appropriate. The fence had the courtesy not to answer. Back at the motel, night happened with no twilight, the way it happens in deserts that remember older rules. The silver comet sign flashed with new conviction. Vacancy/vacancy/vacancy. As if absence were a product it was eager to sell. Inside, I washed my face and found grit in the hollows of my cheeks, as if the town had taken a souvenir. I set the recorder on the bedside table, an old machine with a red button you had to press like you meant it. I told it the time and the temperature, then described the fence and the dish and the way the air had taught itself to carry weight. It is one thing to take notes. It is another to hear your own voice test the shape of a thing that shouldn't exist. When I played the tape back, there was a lag, half a second of dead space between my sentence and its reflection, like the gap in a bad telephone line. And under my voice, the low pulse, the same bass line the fence had been playing, now amplified in the chamber of my rented room. I left the recorder running because there are nights when anything you do on purpose will be used against you. I lay down on the bed that had learned too much and watched the ceiling learn me in return. A tourist Bible on a nightstand stared at me with seasoned endurance. I opened it at random the way gamblers ask for miracles and doctors ask for second opinions. My finger landed on a verse about deserts and tests and angels and hunger. I closed the book. Hunger I understood. Angels I had met under other names. The clock said 8:58, then 8:59. Then it said 9:11 because that is what clocks in haunted towns do. They skip the part where you can still be reasonable. At 9:11, the town exhaled. You could feel it. All at once, lights went out in 3 houses and 1 sign. I sat up and the bed protested like an old friend. From outside came a long, low syllable of something not wind. The recorder's level meter rose to an attention it had never previously achieved. I pressed my palm against the wall and felt a second heartbeat that did not belong to me. I went to the window, eased the curtain with 2 fingers, and did not forget to breathe. The street was not empty. A shape stood under the motel awning, looking toward the diner as if waiting for a ride that had been promised in another lifetime. It was a child, maybe 8, maybe 10. Hard to tell with children who have seen too many adult things. He wore a jacket 1 size too small, or maybe 1 life too old. His hands were at his sides in a way that said he had been taught not to ask. I stepped into my shoes and out the door, not because it was smart, but because curiosity is the most honest thing human beings do. The air had cooled just enough to remember what mercy feels like. A moth dashed itself against the light above my door and apologized. The child didn't turn until I was a few steps away. When he did, he didn't step back or smile or speak. He evaluated me with a seriousness I had not earned. Evening, I said, because men like me still think time of day is a bridge to other people. He shook his head once, tiny, precise. You from the school? I asked. He tipped his chin to the side as if asking which school I meant. The one with the bell or the one with the fence? You waiting for someone? Another small shake. His expression had no contempt in it, which is what made it so unnerving. Contempt is an acknowledgement that you exist. This was something calmer. This was irrigation water sliding through a channel it didn't dare flood. What's your name? I asked finally. He considered the question the way a banker considers a loan. When he spoke, his voice had that newly laundered quality some children have when they practice their lines. You're not supposed to be here yet, he said. The sentence didn't belong to his mouth. It belonged to a script he had been given. Yet the moment he delivered it, something behind his eyes fluttered like a curtain's edge when a door opens in another room. He blinked, slow, as if retrieving himself from a faraway shelf. Then he looked past me and up, and that's when I understood the town's most regular habit. It was always listening to the sky. We both heard it then. The pulse resolved into a pattern. Light is just sound you can't hear yet. The street lamps hummed at a pitch that braided with the recorder's low drone and the fence's steady breath. The motel's sign flashed vacancy and then a brief, illegible shape, as if the bulbs had spelled a private word before repenting. Who told you I wasn't supposed to be here? I asked. He smiled in the way people smile when they've been instructed to reassure a stranger. The man on the radio, he said. There's no station, I said. He nodded. That's why you can hear him. A door clicked behind us. The motel office light came on and then off again. No footsteps, no voice. The boy pulled his sleeves down over his hands and studied his knuckles as if information might be hiding there. I'll walk you home, I said, which is the sort of sentence you say out loud so you can hear whether it's foolish. He shook his head, not in refusal, but in demonstration, and turned to face the vacant lot beside the motel. In the lot, weeds splayed like ink. He stepped forward and a path that had not been visible turned itself on across the ground, a faint pale track glowing as if a phosphorescent tide had receded through sand and changed its mind. The boy followed it without looking back. I took a single step after him, and the glow dimmed. Another step, and it went dark entirely. The desert's version of a locked door. Hey, I said, because there are nights when the only thing we know how to say to each other is wait. He paused, The way Birds paused before deciding on direction. When he turned, his face had softened into something that looked very briefly like the face of a child in a place where children sleep. "It's louder at the fence," he said. "If you write it down, it won't stay." "What won't?" He considered. This time the pause felt unscripted. "Names," he said finally, and then he vanished along a path that saved its light for people who didn't need mine. I didn't follow. No bravado survives long in a town that knows which of your lies are kindness. I went back to my room and sat on the edge of the bed and listened to the recorder sing a song it was not designed to sing. I wrote boy, jacket, path, glow, and watched the words soften, then blur. By the time I underlined fence, the ink had bled into an indecipherable vowel. At 10:03, a coyote laughed without humor. At 10:04, the motel office light clicked on for the exact length of a breath and then surrendered. At 10:07, a page turned somewhere it shouldn't have. I lay down again, this time on top of the bedspread the color of old cigarettes, and thought as little as possible. Some places don't wait for dream to begin their work. I woke to something that was not a sound and not a touch, but the intersection of both. The way thunder rearranges the furniture of your bones, even when it doesn't knock. The recorder had stopped, not because the tape had run out, but because the machine had decided its job description did not include whatever the night wanted it to include. The clock said 12 o'clock in the confident way clocks say 12 o'clock when they have given up. From a floor under the window came a pale lucency, not a beam, but a seep, like milk coaxed through fabric. I knelt and lifted the corner of the curtain. The street was a memory. The motel sign had gone dark or blind. In the middle of the road, exactly where two cracks in the asphalt met, the air thickened into an oval the size of a door you would only walk through if you had already made peace with what you owed. It wasn't light, not the kind we point at and take for granted. It was the idea of light rehearsing for the job. Within it, shapes arranged and rearranged the way birds do when they decide suddenly to think with one mind. I knew then with the kind of certainty that feels like theft, Pine Hollow did not ask the world for permission to exist. Pine Hollow negotiated with something older. It paid in names. It paid in children's voices. It paid in men who remembered lines given to them by radios that don't carry stations anymore. The oval thinned, breathed in, and exhaled itself away. The night became an ordinary mystery again. In the alley beside the diner, a bottle rolled over and chose a new position. A porch light across the street made no promises and kept them. I sat at the little metal desk by the window and wrote my name carefully, block letters, printing even a schoolteacher would endorse. I underlined it twice, then looked away and counted to 5, the stupidest experiment I have ever conducted. When I looked back, the second underline was fainter. When I closed my eyes, I could feel the pulse under the floorboards, a frequency not satisfied with the evening's work. I slid the notebook into my bag and did not lock the zipper. If the town wanted what was written, it would not need permission. On the nightstand, the Bible had moved half an inch. The bedside the way beds sigh when they don't care whom you blame. In the mirror over the dresser, my face held up admirably for a man being slowly erased. Sometime before dawn, the dark loosened and let a thread of gray through. The recorders read, I flickered once in apology and then went out. Birds rehearsed 3 notes and then deferred. A breeze learned itself and pushed at the curtain. The town made a sound like a factory restarting if factories restarted with prayer. I dreamed briefly, or else I remembered on purpose. A field of wires stretched taut across emptiness. A dish turned toward a heaven not interested in confessions. A child counting with his hands behind his back while mountains tried to pretend they were not listening. And under all of it, the sentence I did not want. You were invited because you were already part of it. When I rose, the clock told a believable time. The motel office smelled like coffee made by someone who did not drink coffee. I signed my name in the ledger again because the first signature had softened into a smudge. The proprietor still did not appear, but a fresh key hung on the hook marked 1 though I had been assigned 3. I left it there. You do not correct a town's arithmetic. On Main Street, the diner's door stood open to morning. The waitress was measuring flour into a metal bowl with the sober intensity of a judge. She looked up, saw me, and did not startle. Her eyes were the color of church basement water. "Sleep?" she asked. "Enough," I lied. She nodded as if I had told her a true thing, which meant she had heard a worse one. She set a cup in front of me, and it filled as if gravity had become generous. The radio behind the counter had decided on a song and then asked for more time to remember the words. "The fence," I said. She kneaded dough. Her hands pressed and folded, with the devotion of an apology. "West of the school," she said. "I think it's stronger at night." "I think night is stronger," she said. "Who keeps the station?" I asked. "Station keeps itself," she said. And with the heel of her palm, she pressed a small hollow into the center of the dough, like a town making room for what it cannot bear, and filling it with whatever sweetness was available. I left the diner with a second coffee I did not remember ordering and found the sun had put its hand on my shoulder. The schoolyard looked newly innocent in the day. 2 swing sets, 1 slide, a field that pretended it had always been grass. Children existed again in their proper forms, the way daylight pins them back to physics. They ran in lines, which is to say they ran in chaos. A teacher clapped a pattern that meant order or surrender, depending on your age. At the edge of the yard, I stood alone until I was the kind of alone that calls to other kinds. My watch ticked the universal language of dismissal. Behind the school, the fence waited without impatience. I stepped toward it as a man steps toward a photograph of himself taken at a funeral he hasn't yet attended. The hum was not audible at first. Then it surfaced the way words rise in your mouth when you are about to say someone's name and change your mind. I took out the notebook. On the first page, my name had adjusted itself again, softened at the edges, as if it had been translated twice. On the second page, boy had faded to bow, and glow had chosen to be go. On the third page, my notes about the dish remained intact except for the numbers, which had learned a new arithmetic and refused to be integers. I put the notebook away. Between 2 posts, a patch of wire sagged. I placed my palm there and waited for the skin to learn something. The hum rose, fell, considered, and rose again. In its rhythm was intention, not random, not natural, not wind. A pulse shaped like a question, refusing punctuation. The heat pushed at my back with a brother's rough love. "Okay," I said aloud to whatever was on the other side. "I'm here." The pulse answered by doing what it had done all along, continuing. And from somewhere behind me, not the school, not the diner, not the church bell that had never rung, came a small, clear voice, the voice of a child who had forgiven the town for using his mouth. "You're writing it down wrong," he said. I turned, but the path that had glowed the night before did not consent to exist in daylight, and the boy did not stand where a boy would stand. Only the space where he had been felt gently rearranged, like a bed after someone rises. I looked back at the fence. The wire, which had always looked like wire, had arranged itself into the neat suggestion of a waveform, a visible curl, a teacher's chalk drawing. It was not possible. It was meticulous. It was beautiful in the way mathematics are beautiful for those who have made peace with not being God. I lifted my hand. The hum fell, as if disappointed to lose me. I stepped back. Town days are for forgetting. Town nights are for learning again what you promised not to remember. Pine Hollow had a schedule, and it had volunteered me for its syllabus. I took 3 paces toward the schoolhouse door and her behind me. Just once, a mercy, the faintest syllable of my name spoken by a mouth that was not there. Not the whole name. The first half, cut cleanly, delivered like a receipt. I did not turn back, because some invitations you accept by refusing. By noon, the horizon had lost its argument with distance. Heat made new cities that no one would live in. I walked to the gas station where the pump had learned 3 prices that did not agree with each other. The attendant was a man of delicate wrists and a hose he treated as a partner. He smiled without using his eyes. "Heading on?" he asked. "I just got here," I said. He nodded with the diplomacy of someone who did not intend to disagree with reality, but had taken notes of a better version. He wiped the pump's glass with a rag, and the numbers kept their secrets. When he handed me the receipt, the ink had made a choice against permanence. It was already ghosting away. At the bottom, where a town prints its name to prove the transaction was real. There was only a straight line, a horizon you could not cross. "We don't get many visitors here," he added, out of habit or oath. "I'm not visiting," I said. "Right," he said, relieved. "Right." In the afternoon, something somewhere thumped once, a noise like a door closing in the middle of a field. A dust devil rehearsed being a god and then forgot its lines. In the church doorway, a shadow considered the business of salvation and chose shade instead. I traced the alley to the back of the diner, where deliveries once came. Milk in bottles, eggs in flats, sodas in crates with wooden handles. No deliveries now. Only an empty frame where a door had been, and inside the frame, a rectangle of air that felt cooler in your lungs than the air beside it. I pressed my hand into that rectangle and felt the faintest pressure resisting me. I pulled my hand back and drew a fingertip across my palm. Fine grit like ground shell, like a beach that had forgotten the sea. I pressed my hand in again, slowly this time, as if negotiating with a skittish animal. The pressure yielded a fraction. The recorder in my pocket, which I had switched off, clicked anyway, a child's mouse-sized sound. I withdrew my hand. Across my skin, 5 pale crescents where dust had stuck in the sweat and mapped me to a foreign alphabet. The afternoon wore itself out against the day like a match too small for the job. Pine Hollow calmed in the way places calm when they have done the most they can without giving in. I sat on the motel bed and counted the seconds between pulses in the tape I had made that morning. The numbers formed a pattern only if you were willing to lie to yourself. The pattern was a comfort. The truth was an ache. Outside, the first honest shadow of evening laid itself across Main Street. Somewhere, a teacher's voice finished a sentence and did not start another. The boy on the bicycle placed 1 foot down, 1 foot up, and did not ride away because he already had. The waitress in the paper hat lifted a pie from the oven and breathed in its steam like sacrament. The fence gathered itself, like a throat, to speak. And when the lamps lit themselves and the recorder answered with its red light, and the motel sign declared vacancy to a night that had no room for denials, I understood at last the shape of the invitation I had accepted weeks ago without reading the fine print. This was not a job. This was a summons. The desert outside Pine Hollow is a large place. The space inside Pine Hollow is larger. If you stand at the edge of either and say your name aloud, something says the first half back to you, and something else, patient, careful, ancient, waits for the second. I closed the notebook. I did not lock the door. From the west came a single, definite chime. Not a bell, not metal, not glass. Closer to the sound a glass of water makes when it agrees not to spill. The pulse tightened, the fence steadied its breath, and the town took one collective step closer to whatever it believed in. I stepped to the window and parted the curtain. The path in the vacant lot did not glow. The child did not appear. The motel office light did not turn on. But the sky just above the trailer's dish flexed into an oval the size of a door. The recorder clicked into a sound no one had taught it. And somewhere deep in the paper that held my name, the letters leaned toward one another like conspirators. To be continued in part 2, The Disappearing Children.